Hi, I'm Mike Handberger with Turkey Fast Studios. Today I'm going to show you how to apply animations to a third-person character controller. We've covered the third-person character controller in another video, but this video will add to that and show you how to add animations. By the end of this video, you should be able to set up the 3D character controller, add a third-person camera controller, and then control the animations of the player character. So let's start off. We have an empty scene here. It has some geometry, it has a camera, and that's about it. There's no player character. So the first thing we want to do is actually add our player character. We're just going to add a state machine. So right click, go to cat, states, and then state machine. This creates a new state machine. Let's call this player, and let's also tag it as the player. Now, the next thing we want to do is to add a player controller to it. So we'll add the player controller 3D. We'll set walk speed to 5, run speed to 10, turn speed to, let's set that to 20 maybe. The next thing we want to do is add a character controller. That's part of Unity. We're going to adjust this a little bit. We're going to move this up. So now we have this little collider. The next thing we want to do is add a mesh. So let's find a mesh and add our thing. We have a knight here. Now he has an avatar, but he doesn't have any animations. So let's see if we can select some. So I've got one right there. If we look in the animator, this is a little bit complicated. This is the free RPG character animation controller. You can get it on the Unity Asset Store. It's free. It comes with a whole bunch of animations. Anyway, so it's pretty complicated. It has a bunch of parameters, a whole bunch of states. The big thing here is that when you're moving, you need to both set this moving or strafing, depending on which one you're doing, or if you're doing both, then both parameter. And you also need to set the velocity X and Z. So let's go to our player controller here. Animation target, that's the first thing we want to set. I'm going to rename this because somebody spelled this wrong. And that's just going to bug me. So we're going to add a path to this. So it's set to owner, that would be the player. We want to actually target this knight prefab here. So I can't spell it. And then the walking parameter name, so this is going to set the velocity. So we need to set this to velocity Z for walking, so that's forward and back. And then velocity X for side to side. And that's for strafing. The next thing we want to do is add some access input actions here. Let's add 2. So we'll add 1 for vertical. So the vertical would be up arrow, down arrow, W or S. And we're going to set that to on walk. And then over here, we're going to set this one to be horizontal. And that's left arrow, right arrow, or A and D, and we're going to set that to on strafe. And then the next thing, so remember I mentioned you need to set both velocity X and strafing, or velocity Z and moving. So what we're going to need to do is add some triggers here so that we can make sure we set the moving and strafing. So we're going to do float animation parameter trigger, and we're going to point that at, once again, we're going to add a path here, and we're going to do knight prefab, parameter name, velocity Z, comparison, so we're going to compare it to 0, but we want to say whenever it's not equal to 0, we want this trigger to fire. So basically, whenever velocity Z is set to anything other than 0, our trigger here is going to fire, And our trigger is going to set a bool animation parameter, and that's what this moving is. And once again, we're going to have to set a path, and we're going to have night prefab, and the parameter name is moving. And we're going to set it on, and we're going to revert on stop. So now we can just make a copy of this by selecting it and hit Control D. We want to change velocity Z to velocity X, and then this parameter from moving to strafing. So now whenever the velocity X is not equal to 0, we're going to set the strafing parameter to on. All right. Next thing we probably want to do is allow you to turn the player around. So let's do that with a mouse trigger here. So input mouse button trigger, and then we're going to add an access input, and the access name is going to be mouse X, so the left and right of the mouse, and we'll set that to on turn. So whenever you hold down the left mouse button, you're going to be able to turn. The next thing we want to do is set up our camera. So this is just a regular camera here. To make it into a cat camera, we need to add the cat camera component, and then we need to decide what type of camera we want it. We want it to be a third-person camera, so we're going to add that, and then we select it over here. Now most of these parameters are good, although we want initial camera target to be the player, and then we want to pan with the target so that the camera kind of turns around with the player. Everything else over here should be good. Let's go back to our scene. So one thing we want to do is our night prefab here has this rotator script that's going to turn it around, and we just want to remove that. It also has a character controller. We don't want that either. So now let's give this a try. So we can use the mouse button to turn around, and then we can walk forwards, we can walk backwards, we can strafe left, we can strafe right, we can strafe and walk at the same time. Looks kind of funny, but it's doing the right thing. Alright, next thing we need to do is add some jumping. So in order to do that, we need to add a jump controller to the player. So we're going to add a jump controller. So on the jump controller here, let's set the jump force to 10. That sounds good. So we could set the animation here, but again, this animation controller is a little tricky. So what you have to do is you have to first set this jumping parameter to something, to 1, and then you have to hit the jump trigger afterwards. And that just doesn't play nice with the way that this thing works. So we're going to do that manually. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to add a trigger here, which is for player jump. So we add a player jump trigger. There's no parameters to it. And then we're going to add 2 actions here. First, we're going to have an integer animation parameter, and then we're going to have a animation trigger parameter. And for both of these, we're going to set this to owner and then path. Set the night prefab. Once again, path on owner. Okay. This parameter name, this is the jump trigger. And this parameter name is going to be jumping. And we want to set that to 1. And then we want to revert on stop so that when it actually lands, it's going to turn off that parameter. That will cause it to land on the ground. So if we go back to our scene over here, so the next thing we want to do is add an access input for that. So let's go ahead and add a second one. We'll use that for running. So this first one, This first one we're going to say jump, and then we're going to set it to on jump. The second one we're going to set to fire 3, which is shift, and we're going to set it to on run. Okay, so now we can, so if we walk, we can hold down shift and run backwards, strafe. I don't think there's a strafe run animation here, so, but we can definitely run forwards. And then if we hit spacebar, we jump and we land, we jump and we land. So we can jump and land, and jump and land. So that's pretty complete there. What if we wanted to do some attacking though? Now, you'll have to grab Cat RPG and set that up and watch some of the videos on that to actually use some real player attacks, but we're going to fake it for now. So if we add a button, oops, input button trigger here, let's actually add 2 of them, right? So first one we'll set to fire 2. Oops, let's set that one to fire 1. Set this one to fire 2. And so for this one, we'll have this be an attack. So we want, in order to do that, let's take a look at our animator here. So what we need to do is we need to set this action to something, and then we need to hit the attack trigger. So action is an integer, so we'll set integer animation parameter, and then trigger animation parameter. So again, we're going to set owner, but we're going to do path, and we're going to do night prefab, owner, path, night prefab. This parameter is going to be attack trigger, and this parameter is going to be action. Let's set that to 1, I think, which is an attack. And let's copy these and paste them down here. So this is going to set action to 1, and then we'll do another thing here, which is the kick trigger, right? Attack kick trigger, that is. That should cause them to do a kick. So depending whether we hit Control or Alt is whether it's going to kick or punch. So one thing we're going to need to do is in our jump here, we're going to have to reset that. So let's duplicate this integer animation parameter. Let's set it to action and set it to -1 so that it resets. We don't have to revert on stop. So that it resets our action. Let's also, while we're at it, reset our movement and strafing. So move those up here, and once again, options, path, and then set that to night prefab. Parameter name here is moving, and let's just duplicate that one and change it to strafing. And then let's copy these and just paste those in here so that we turn off moving, because it doesn't, this animation controller does not support moving and attacking at the same time. So we got to turn those off, which will look a little funny if we're in the middle of something. See, we're going to stop moving until the next time we move. But we can jump, we can punch, we can kick, we can walk around, punch, kick, jump, and next thing we could do is add a dead state if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and do that quickly. So on the player here, we're going to add, we're going to add a new state. Let's just duplicate that. So we have alive, then we have dead, and for alive, let's just pull in all this stuff. Ready? So we'll do all that stuff, move that into alive. And then in dead, we want to do, so if we look at the animator here, we have a death 1 trigger and a revive 1 trigger. So add a animation trigger. We're going to add 2 of them. One of them we're going to set to a stop action. Again, we got to set this path and add night prefab. Let's do the same thing over here. This one's going to be death 1 trigger. This is going to be revive 1. So basically when we go in, it hits the death 1 trigger, and then when we leave, it hits the revive 1 trigger. So we're going to have to simulate this because we don't have any way to die right now. So one thing we're going to need to do is on our player, set the initial state to alive. One other thing I'd like to change here is the smoothing on the camera. I like to set that to 0 on third-person cameras. I mean, you probably might be able to set it up a little bit more than 0, but anyway. So we can walk, we can jump, we can punch, and kick. And now if we come over here to the dead state, and we come over here and set that to the current state, he falls over dead. And if we go to the alive state, we set that to the current state, he's going to get up, he can kick and punch and walk around again. All better. So in this video, you should have learned how to set up a player controller that uses 3D and a third-person camera controller, and then add animations to the player so that they can walk, strafe, and jump, and then they can do some actions such as kicking and punching, and then they can go into a dead state where they fall over, and a revive state, or they can be revived afterwards and get back up. I hope you found this video informative and useful. Let us know in the comments if there are other videos or tutorials you'd like to see. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on social media for the latest videos and other news. For more information on CAT and how it can help you build and prototype games faster, please visit catgamebuilder.com. I'm Mike Hanverger with Turkey Fast Studios. Thanks for watching.